am attorney Marie-Chris Bathan-Lasco. This is my virtual classroom. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this channel, I shall aim to simplify the law. I will discuss concepts and principles of law in under 10 minutes. Hello again, everyone. For this video, I want to talk about what the creditor can actually do if the debtor fails to fulfill his obligation. We can actually find the remedies of your creditor under Article 1165 of your Civil Code. So, let's begin. Let's look at Article 1165. Your 1165 actually enumerates the remedies of your creditor as against a debtor who fails to comply with his obligation. And the obligation that we're talking about here is a real obligation, meaning an obligation to give a thing. If you can still remember, an obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. And as I've mentioned previously, when we talk about obligations to give, these are real obligations. And when we're talking about an obligation to do or not to do, we're referring to personal obligations. 1165 is applicable to real obligations. Now, looking into further 1165, it actually gives you the different remedies for a real obligation. And your real obligation can also be subclassified. It could be a specific real obligation or a generic real obligation. Are the remedies the same? They are similar, but not everything is the same. So let's talk about the remedies first. If the obligation is to give a specific thing or a specific real obligation. So the first remedy is to demand specific performance plus damages. Second is to demand rescission or cancellation plus damages. Third is just ask for damages if that's the only feasible remedy. Now, where are we getting the remedy for damages? If you look at 1165, it makes mention there that in addition to the remedy under Article 1170 and 1170, that actually refers to your damages. You have these other remedies, which I've mentioned, demanding for specific performance, or you demand for cancellation or rescission. So let's talk about the first remedy, demanding specific performance. When you say you demand specific performance or you compel specific performance, what kind of compulsion are we referring to here? Does this cover force through violence or threat? The answer is no. What we are referring to here is legal compulsion. You do not take the law into your own hands. So, when you make a demand, of course, first you have extrajudicial demand, you make a demand letter, and if still there is no fulfillment from the debtor, then you can go on and file a case in court. So, you may also opt to cancel or rescind the contract still with damages, or if the only feasible remedy is for damages, then you file a claim for damages. Those are the remedies for specific real obligations. Now, how about generic real obligations? Again, when you say generic, the thing that you are promising to deliver is not segregated from a class. What are the remedies? If the thing that is being promised to be delivered is a generic thing, and we have already distinguished between the two, between a specific thing and a generic thing. Can your creditor ask for specific performance? The answer is no. You can file for an action for specific performance because the thing is not specific. But can you still demand that the obligation be fulfilled? The answer is yes. But we don't call it anymore specific performance. So you may ask, first remedy, you ask for the performance, but again, it's just that the naming of of the action. It's no longer specific performance. Another remedy is to ask that the obligation be complied with at the expense of another person. And lastly, to recover damages for breach of the obligation. So, those are your general remedies for your generic real obligation and your specific real obligations under 1165. Now, apart from the difference in remedies when we talk about generic real obligations and specific real obligations, another aspect that they are also different is on the effect of fortuitous events. Now, what are fortuitous events? Fortuitous events are events which cannot be foreseen or which, though foreseen, is inevitable. Now, before we talk about the difference on the effect of fortuitous events on generic real obligation and on specific real obligations, let's talk about what a fortuitous event is, as I've defined earlier. Again, fortuitous events are events which cannot be foreseen or which, though foreseen, are inevitable. So let's divide this into two parts. Fortuitous events are events which cannot be foreseen. That's the first part. And the second part is that although it may be foreseen, it is inevitable. Let us give examples on the first part. Fortuitous events which cannot be foreseen. Now, is an earthquake foreseeable? Generally, no. Although we may have the technology to say that there may be an earthquake in prior to it hitting us, maybe just a few seconds, still, generally, we cannot foresee an earthquake in the same way that we can foresee a storm. So your earthquake is a fortuitous event that generally cannot be foreseen. How about your typhoon or your storms? Yes, we can foresee them. We have the technology to foresee a storm or a typhoon coming. We may be able to know even days prior to that. But a fortuitous event will also refer to events, although we can foresee them, we cannot avoid them. Because we said the second part are those events, although foreseeable, are inevitable. These are fortuitous events. Now, let's talk about the effect of fortuitous events on specific real obligations on the one hand, and generic real obligations on the other. So, what is the difference? The difference is that if there is loss, okay, and the loss is caused by a fortuitous event, as we have defined and we have given examples already, the effect is not the same. When we talk about generic real obligations and your specific real obligations. So, for example, if we talk about a specific real obligation, A promised to deliver a particular car to B. Let's say Mitsubishi Lancer with plate number XYZ123. So that's a specific thing. And A promised to deliver such to B on, let's say, October 20, 2021. Okay? Now, if that particular car, that specific car, is totally lost, totally wrecked because of a typhoon, and a typhoon is a fortuitous event, and such is lost, all right? That particular car is lost prior to October 20, 2021, the date agreed upon for the delivery. What happens to the obligation to deliver that car? The obligation is extinguished. Why? Because you can no longer deliver the car. It's already totally wrecked. and the cause of the loss is a fortuitous event. Now, how about if it's a generic real obligation or an obligation to give a generic thing? What would be the effect of loss? So, let's say, for example, the obligation is to deliver a Mitsubishi car. That is a generic thing. Why? Because there are a lot of Mitsubishi cars. It's not segregated from a class. Supposing A already planned to give a Mitsubishi car, can he use now the reason that that car that he planned to give was lost due to a fortuitous event? Now remember, a generic thing is never lost. Why? Because you can always replace it with something else. You can always replace it with another Mitsubishi car. So you cannot use, therefore, loss due to a fortuitous event because a generic thing is never lost. A generic thing never perishes. That's another difference between an effect to your generic real obligation and your specific real obligation. Remember, however, that yes, as a general rule, in specific real obligations, the general rule, as I've already mentioned, is that loss due to a fortuitous event will extinguish the obligation. That's the general rule. And just like any general rule, there are exceptions. What are the exceptions? The exception is if the debtor or the obligor delays. And second is if the obligor is guilty in bad faith. And then we have Article 1166, which says that the obligation to give a determinate thing includes that of delivering all its accessions and accessories, even though they may not have been mentioned. So, even if the agreement was, in the contract, the agreement was to deliver a specific car, it does not mention there to deliver the keys to the car or the tools of the car. That is already implied in the contract by virtue of Article 1166. Why? What is the principle behind that? Because the accession or the accessory will always follow the principle. Now, to better understand the principle, please read the case of Calion versus Agos Development Corporation, GR number 77365, April 7, 1992. So that's it for this video. I hope you have learned a thing or two, and I will see you in the next. So if you find this video helpful, please click like, subscribe, and that notification bell so that you will be notified of new video uploads. Thank you for watching. See you next time in MBL Classroom.